My name is Arthur Vance, and at 3:07 in the morning, on the 24th floor of the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, my stepson kicked my door until it burst inward. The sound was not just a noise, it was a physical violation that shattered the expensive air-conditioned silence of the suite. Then my wife Deborah stepped into the splinters on the carpet and whispered to me like I was the problem. "Just give him what he wants, Arthur," she said. For a second, I could not move. It was not because I was scared of Tyler. Tyler Sloan was 28 years old and loud, not tough. I could not move because the sound of that door breaking did something permanent inside me. It was not just wood and brass that had snapped, it was a line. It was a boundary. It was the one line I had spent 10 years trying to keep straight in a marriage that always wanted to bend. The hallway outside was dead quiet in that special insulated hotel way, carpeted silence and the distant hum of an elevator somewhere down the corridor. Then Tyler filled that silence with his drunk breath and his rage. "I want that room now," Tyler shouted. He shouted like he owned the whole floor. He wore expensive board shorts and a cheap black tank top, the kind a tourist buys when they want to pretend they are local. His eyes were red, rimmed with exhaustion and chemicals. His hair stuck up like he'd been sleeping, but I knew he had not been sleeping. I could smell the bar on him from across the room. Stale beer and something sugary, and the sharp, aggressive bite of tequila. It was the kind of smell that crawls into your nose and tells you trouble has already arrived. Deborah stood behind him. She was barefoot in a white hotel robe, her hair pulled into a messy knot. Her face was pinched, tired, and annoyed, but she was annoyed at me, not at him. "Arthur," she said, using that specific tone she saved for when she wanted something from me without looking like she was asking for it. "Don't make this worse. Just switch rooms. He is upset." "Upset," she said the word as if a grown man kicking down a locked door at 3 in the morning was just a mood swing. I stared at her, and she did not meet my eyes. Instead, she stared at the broken latch on the floor, as if she was already deciding how to explain the damage to the front desk. Tyler pointed past me into my room at the king-size bed by the window. The curtains were half open. Outside, the Las Vegas Strip glowed with artificial daylight, moving dots of cars and the flashing neon of a city that never sleeps. It was supposed to be romantic. In that moment, it looked like a stage set for my humiliation. "That is the room I'm taking," Tyler said. "This is our room," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was too calm, too flat, like I was listening to myself from across the room. Tyler's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Not anymore." Deborah finally looked at me, and her eyes held that familiar mix of pressure and pity. It was the look that said, "Be the bigger man, be the adult, pay the price so we can all go back to pretending everything is fine." "Arthur," she said again, softer, almost pleading, "you know he has been having a hard time. Don't be selfish over a bed." Selfish. That word landed like a slap across my face. It was not about a bed, it was about everything I had been swallowing for a decade. The traffic tickets, the rent Tyler could not cover, the temporary loans that never came back. It was about the way Deborah could always find a reason why Tyler's behaviour was not really his fault. And somehow I was always the one expected to absorb the impact. I stood there in my t-shirt and pyjama shorts, with the cool air from the hallway hitting my legs. I felt the floor steady under my feet, while everything else in my life shifted. I looked at the broken door frame. The wood was split clean where the latch had been. A sliver of oak dangled like a loose tooth. The hinge creaked under the pressure of the door hanging wrong. Without meaning to, my brain did what it always did as an auditor. It started sorting the scene like a file. Damage, liability, forced entry. Not a simple noise complaint. If security got called, they would write an incident report. They would check the cameras. They always check the cameras. I had spent 30 years reading the fine print of accidents that people swore were not their fault. People could cry and yell all they wanted. The paperwork did not care. Tyler stepped forward, his chest puffed out. "Move." I am taking it. I looked at him for a long second. I thought about grabbing him by the collar and shoving him back into the hallway. I thought about raising my voice, letting the whole floor hear how ridiculous this was. I thought about how satisfying it would feel for maybe 10 seconds. And then I thought about the cameras. I thought about how quickly a man my age becomes the villain in someone else's story if there is no proof. I thought about how Deborah would twist it later. I stepped back, not because I was giving in, but because I was stepping out. Fine, I said. Tyler's face lit up with smug relief, like he had won something he always believed he deserved. Deborah let out a breath, like I had finally behaved. Thank you, she said, and she meant it. She meant thank you for not forcing her to choose. She meant thank you for making it easier for her. I did not reply. I walked to the closet and pulled my suitcase out. I moved slowly, deliberately. I folded my clothes with neat corners, the way my mother taught me. I packed my belt, my toothbrush, my shaving kit. Tyler shoved past me into the room and flopped onto the bed like a teenager claiming the couch. He kicked off his flip-flops and laughed to himself. Deborah hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me pack. She did not offer to help. She did not apologize. She did not even look embarrassed. You are being dramatic, she said, like she could not stand the quiet. It is just one night. One night, I repeated, and my voice stayed level. Sure. I zipped the suitcase. The sound was loud in the room. I picked it up and walked past her into the hall. Where are you going? She asked. I turned to face her. Tyler was already laughing in the room behind her, muttering something about finally getting what he wanted. I wanted to say 100 things to her. I wanted to tell her I had spent years being the adult in a house that kept rewarding childish cruelty. I wanted to tell her that a man can only bend so many times before he stays bent. Instead, I said, somewhere with a lock. Her mouth fell open. For a second, I saw real offense in her eyes. Not guilt. Offense. As if I had insulted her, not like she had just watched her son break into our room. Arthur, she started. I did not wait for the rest. I walked toward the elevator with my suitcase rolling behind me, the broken door still yawning open like a wound back there. The elevator arrived with a soft ding. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, Deborah's face was the last thing I saw, standing in the hall, wrapped in a robe, looking at me like I had just embarrassed her in public. The elevator descended smoothly. Floor numbers ticked down. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Deborah. Don't do anything stupid. I stared at those words. I hadn't even done anything yet. But as the elevator dropped towards the lobby, I knew I was done paying for other people's peace. And I also knew something else, something colder and clearer than anger. When you kick down a door, you don't get to decide what happens next. The lobby of the Bellagio was almost empty when I rolled my suitcase across the polished marble floor. It was that strange hour that hotels live in. Too late for the night owls, too early for the morning commuters. The famous glass flowers on the ceiling hung suspended in frozen silence. A single couple dozed on a velvet sofa near the elevators, their sandals kicked off, heads tilted together in exhaustion. Behind the front desk, a printer hummed and stopped. The night manager looked up when he heard the rhythm of my suitcase wheels. His name tag read Marcus Thorne. He was young, maybe mid-30s, with a neatly pressed uniform and eyes that had already seen too many versions of the same sad story in this city. He did not ask why I was checking out at 4 a.m. He just straightened his tie and smiled the way luxury hotels train you to smile. Polite, distant, and impenetrable. Good morning, Mr. Vance, Marcus said. Early flight? I stopped at the desk and set my suitcase upright. I felt the weight of the handle in my palm, the solid reassurance of the only thing that was still mine to carry. I need to make a change to my account, I said. Certainly, Marcus replied. May I have your room number? Suite 2405, I said. But starting now, that room is no longer tied to my credit card. His fingers paused over the keyboard. He looked up, his professional mask slipping just a fraction. Sir, are you checking out entirely? I am, I said. Split the folio, effective immediately. Marcus typed for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. And the remaining guests? Mrs. Vance and the other gentleman? They will handle their own charges from this moment forward, I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had been in years. One moment, sir. I watched his screen from a distance. You learn in my line of work, auditing, how to watch without staring. I saw the cursor move, fields populated, names, dates, authorization codes. It was the quiet machinery of accountability coming online. May I confirm, Marcus said, glancing up, his tone shifting to something more official, that all future incidentals for Suite 2405 should be removed from your authorization? That is correct. And damages? Marcus asked softly. That is also correct. He hesitated for just a fraction of a second. He knew. In Las Vegas, hotel staff always know when a door has been kicked in or a lamp thrown. Sir, there was a noise complaint logged regarding the entry door. I am aware, I said. That is why I am here. Marcus nodded slowly. Understood. He typed for another minute, the keys clicking like dry bones. Then he slid a piece of paper across the marble counter. Please review and sign, he said. I read it carefully. Timestamp 4:12 a.m. Authorization removed. Responsibility transferred. It was clean. It was proper. It was a legal wall built between my bank account and their chaos. I signed my name, Arthur Vance. The ink looked dark and permanent. As I handed the paper back, I felt something loosen in my chest. It was not relief exactly. It felt more like alignment, like a dislocated joint slipping back into the socket where it belonged. Thank you, Marcus said. He looked at me, really looked at me, with a flash of genuine respect. If you need assistance with transportation to McCarran Airport, the valet is just outside. I stepped out of the air-conditioned sanctuary into the warm Nevada night. The air smelled of exhaust, desert dust, and expensive perfume masking something rotten. The valet stand was empty, but a black car pulled up within minutes. I loaded my suitcase and slid into the back seat. As we pulled away, I looked up at the hotel one last time. 30-odd floors of light and glass towering over the fountains. Somewhere up there, in Suite 2405, Deborah and her son were probably celebrating their victory, likely ordering room service, already rewriting the story in their heads. Arthur gave in. Arthur always gives in. My phone buzzed again. Deborah, where are you going? Tyler is hungry. The room service menu is stuck to the TV. I did not answer. The driver chatted about traffic and the heat. I nodded in the right places, but my thoughts were drifting back through the years like a slow, painful movie reel. I remembered Tyler at 16 slamming doors in our house in Cleveland. Tyler at 22 calling me from a county jail because his car had been impounded. Tyler at 26 swearing he would pay me back this time. Each time, Deborah had said the same thing. He is trying, Arthur. He is sensitive. Don't push him. And each time I had paid, I paid with money. I paid with silence. I paid with my own dignity. The airport was bright and noisy, filled with the aggressive chiming of slot machines that greeted travelers even at the gates. I checked my bag, printed my boarding pass, and sat at the gate with my laptop bag between my feet. I pulled out my little black notebook. It fit perfectly in my jacket pocket. I'd carried something like it since the 80s, back when my first boss taught me the value of writing things down the moment they happened. I clicked my Parker pen, an old silver one, and wrote 4:21 a.m. left property, folio split, liability disclaimed. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail. Deborah's voice spilled out, tight and annoyed. Arthur, this is ridiculous. The card was declined for room service. Fix this. You are embarrassing us. I stared at the phone. My thumb hovered over the banking app. It would be so easy. Just one transfer, just $500 to make the noise stop. That was the muscle memory of my marriage. Pay to make it stop. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the terminal window. I saw a man with greying hair and deep lines around his mouth. A man who looked 10 years older than his age. A man who looked used. Fix this. No. I whispered to the glass. I turned the phone off, completely off. The screen went black, and for the first time in a decade, the silence that followed belonged entirely to me. By the time the plane landed back on the mainland, I had made up my mind about one thing. I was not going to argue anymore. Cleveland was waiting for me with its familiar heavy sky. The air here was different from the perfumed heat of Las Vegas. It was cold, smelling of wet asphalt and impending snow. It felt like reality. I drove straight from the airport to the credit union, my suitcase still in the trunk. The teller, a woman named Sarah, who had known me for 15 years, smiled when she saw me, but her smile faltered when she saw my face. "Do you want your usual withdrawal, Arthur?" she asked. "No," I said. "I need to put a temporary hold on a supplementary card, the one issued to Deborah Vance." She did not ask why. She just typed. As she worked, my phone lit up on the counter. It was a text from Deborah. "Deborah, the hotel is saying Tyler has to pay for the door. They are calling the police if we don't settle the bill. Fix this." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I put my phone back in my pocket and signed the form Sarah placed in front of me. I was not fixing anything anymore. I did not go straight home after the credit union. I sat in my car in the parking lot, the engine off, my hands resting on the freezing steering wheel. The city was waking up around me, delivery trucks backing up with their warning beeps, a woman unlocking the door to the bakery across the street, steam fogging the windows. This is the part people never see in movies. They imagine revenge as a switch. You flip a table, you give a speech, you slam a door on the way out, but real consequences start smaller. They start with paperwork. I drove to my office instead. It was a low brick building in Lakewood, on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. I had worked there long enough that the smell of it, stale coffee, toner, and old industrial carpet, felt like muscle memory. I unlocked my door, turned on the lights, and set my suitcase down beside my desk. On the wall behind me hung framed certificates that most people never read: licenses, continuing education credits, boring things, the kind of things you only notice when they're missing. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the original hotel reservation for the Bellagio. Suite 2405, Arthur Vance, Deborah Vance. There it was, the quiet detail I'd already suspected. Tyler Sloan was not on the original guest list. Deborah had tried to add him later verbally, but the official registration still only showed two names. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes. This was not about catching someone in a trap. It was about understanding how responsibility actually works when things go wrong. I drafted an email to the Bellagio's risk management department. I did not write it as an angry husband. I wrote it as an auditor. Subject: incident documentation, Suite 2405, request for preservation of evidence. I requested the security footage. I requested the incident report. I clarified that the individual who caused the damage was an unregistered guest who forced entry. I attached my confirmation number. I signed my name, then I waited. While I waited, I stood up and looked at the small framed photograph on my filing cabinet. It was a picture of the three of us from 5 years ago: Deborah smiling, me looking tired, and Tyler looking bored in the background. I took the frame in my hands. I did not throw it. I did not smash the glass. I carefully opened the back, removed the photo, and flipped it over. On the back of the photo, in blue ink, I wrote, "Case closed." Then I slid the photo into a plain manila folder. I placed the empty frame back on the cabinet. It looked better that way. Cleaner. My phone rang. A number I did not recognize. I answered. "This is Arthur," I said. "Mr. Vance, this is Marcus Thorne from the Bellagio," the voice said. He sounded careful. "I am calling to follow up regarding the incident report." "Go on," I said. "We have documented the damage," he continued. "There is a question about liability. Mrs. Vance is claiming the damage was accidental, a result of a domestic dispute. The individual involved, my stepson, was not a registered guest," I said. "He kicked the door from the hallway. That is vandalism, Mr. Thorne. not a domestic dispute. There was a pause. I could hear papers shifting on his end. That changes how we classify the incident, Marcus said slowly. If he was not a registered guest and you have removed authorization. I have, I said. Then the hotel will pursue damages directly from Mr. Sloane as a civil matter. We may involve local authorities. Do what you have to do, I said. Send me the final report when it is finalised. Yes, sir. When the call ended, I felt a vibration in my chest. It was not panic. It was power. The quiet, boring power of facts. I left the office and drove to the grocery store. I needed coffee, the good kind. I was standing in the aisle, staring at a bag of dark roast beans that I usually considered too expensive when I heard my name. Art? Arthur Vance? I turned. It was Frank Kowalski, a retired mechanic I knew from the neighbourhood. We had not spoken much in years, just nods over the fence. He was wearing a heavy coat and holding a basket of apples. Frank, I said, good to see you. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing slightly under his cap. Is Deborah back yet? No, I said, not yet. He hesitated. I heard, well, my nephew works security at the airport. He said he saw you come in alone this morning, said you looked like you had been through a war. I reached into my pocket where I'd folded the printout of the email confirmation from the hotel. I do not know why I did it. Maybe I just needed someone else to see the truth. I handed the paper to him. Just a long night, Frank. Frank read the paper. He read the words, forced entry and authorization removed. He looked up at me, and his expression changed. It was not pity. It was recognition. Huh, Frank said. He handed the paper back. Well, that is something. He looked at the bag of expensive coffee in my hand. You should buy that coffee, Art, Frank said. Life is too short to drink the cheap stuff. Thank you, Frank, I said. Take care of yourself, he said, and then he walked away. That was it. No gossip, no judgment, just acknowledgement from one man to another that sometimes you have to draw a line. I drove home. The house was cold. I turned up the thermostat and listened to the furnace kick on. I brewed the coffee. I sat in my living room chair and watched the snow begin to fall outside, covering the grey sidewalk in a sheet of perfect, untouched white. My phone buzzed again. An email notification from Mercer Legal Services. Subject, Notice of Intent. I opened it. It was a letter from a lawyer Deborah had found. It accused me of financial abandonment and inflicting emotional distress. It was a threat. I took a sip of the coffee. It was rich and bitter and hot. I opened my notebook and wrote one more line below the entry from the airport. 11:42 a.m, legal threat, received, no response sent. I closed the book. I was not afraid. In fact, for the first time in years, I was looking forward to the meeting. The mediation center was located on the second floor of a brick building in downtown Cleveland, right across from the courthouse. The room smelled of burnt coffee and old carpet, the stagnant scent of other people's problems. It was the kind of place designed to make everyone feel equally unimportant. I arrived 10 minutes early. That was not a strategy. That was simply who I was. I sat at the long, scratched mahogany table and set my manila folder down in front of me, squaring it perfectly with the edge of the table. To the right of the folder, I placed my black notebook. On top of the notebook, I rested my silver Parker pen. Everything lined up. When your life starts feeling crooked, straight lines are the only things that help. Deborah arrived 5 minutes late. She looked like she had dressed for a job interview. She was terrified of failing. A navy blazer, low heels. Her hair pulled back too tight. She looked older than she had in Las Vegas. Her eyes flicked toward my folder, then darted away, unable to land on me. Tyler followed her in. He slouched into the room, his shoulders hunched forward like a boxer waiting for a bell. He wore a wrinkled button-down shirt and scuffed sneakers. He dropped into the chair opposite me, crossed his arms and stared at the wall. He vibrated with a mix of entitlement and fear. The mediator, a woman named Miss. Garrett, with tired eyes and a voice devoid of emotion, introduced herself. She explained the ground rules. Be respectful. Do not interrupt. Focus on resolution. I listened. Tyler did not. So let us just say it, Tyler snapped before Miss Garrett had even finished opening her file. He left us. He locked us out of the money. He humiliated us in front of the hotel staff, and he is humiliating us now. That is what this is about. Miss Garrett turned to me. Mr. Vance? I did not answer right away. I opened my folder. The sound of the paper turning was the only noise in the room. Inside were the copies, the incident report, the time-stamped folio change, the email confirmations, and the printed statement from Marcus Thorne regarding the forced entry. I laid them out one by one, slow and visible, like a tarot reading where every card spells disaster for the other person. I am not here to argue, I said, my voice steady. I am here to clarify the timeline. Tyler laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. You think waving papers around makes you right? I looked at him. I really looked at him. He was sweating already, his jaw working. He wanted me to yell. He wanted me to be the angry stepfather so he could be the victim. I denied him that satisfaction. Let us start with the timeline, I said, sliding the first document forward. 3:07 a.m. security footage confirms Tyler Sloan in the hallway outside suite 2405. He kicks the door. The door breaks inward. No one else touches it. Tyler shifted in his chair. That is not how it... I am not finished, I said calmly. The mediator raised a hand toward Tyler. He scoffed but leaned back, sulking. 3:09 a.m., I continued. Front desk receives a noise complaint. 3:15 a.m. damage is documented by security. 3:17 a.m. I exit the room with my suitcase. Deborah stared at the table, her hands twisting a tissue into a white knot. I slid the next page forward. This is the guest registration, I said. My name. Deborah's name. Original booking time. Tyler's name is not here. That does not mean anything, Tyler snapped. It means everything, I said. I turned to the mediator. Responsibility follows registration. He was not a registered guest at the time of entry. Therefore, his actions are classified as vandalism by an unauthorized individual, not an accident by a guest. I slid the final document forward. This is the incident report from the Bellagio. It confirms this classification. Tyler stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly across the floor. You are doing this on purpose, he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. You planned this. You wanted me to get screwed. You ruined my life. Sir, please sit down, Miss Garrett said firmly. You could have paid, Tyler yelled, ignoring her. You always paid. You have the money. You are just being a cheap, bitter old man. The room went quiet. That sentence hung in the air, heavier than anything else he had said. You always paid. I looked at him, then I looked at the papers spread out between us. No, I said. I did not ruin your life, Tyler. I closed the folder and folded my hands on top of it. I just stopped paying for your mistakes. Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it, his face flushing a deep, embarrassed red. There is a difference, I added. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The silence was thick. Then, for the first time, I looked directly at Deborah. She was crying now, silent tears tracking through her makeup. And you? I said softly. She looked up, startled. Do you know why I left Deb? I asked. It was not the money. The door cost $2,000. I have that in my checking account right now. Deborah blinked, confused. Then why? Why put us through this? Because when that wood snapped, I said, leaning forward slightly, you looked at the broken latch before you looked at me. You worried about the noise before you worried about your husband. Deborah flinched, as if I had hit her. I realized then, I said, that I was just an insurance policy to you. I was the person who cleans up the mess. I was never the partner. Arthur, please, she whispered. I did not come here to win, I said, standing up. I came here to be done. I looked at the mediator. Based on the documentation, I trust you will find that financial responsibility rests with Mr. Sloan. Miss Garrett nodded slowly, looking at the undeniable spread of evidence. The documentation is quite clear, Mr. Vance. Tyler let out a strangled sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. This is where my involvement ends, I said, financially, legally, emotionally. I picked up my notebook. I slid my silver pen into my pocket. I left the copies of the evidence on the table. They could keep them. I didn't need to carry them anymore. As I walked toward the heavy oak door, Tyler shouted after me one last time, "You think this makes you strong, walking away?" I stopped with my hand on the brass handle. It felt solid and cool under my palm. I did not turn around. "I think it makes me free," I said. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, leaving the noise behind me. The house felt different after the mediation. It did not feel empty exactly. It felt cleaner. It was like a room after all the heavy mismatched furniture had been moved out, and the dust had finally settled enough for you to see the floor again. Deborah did not come home that night. She texted me to say she was staying with a friend from her church group. I replied with a simple, "Okay." There was no argument. There was no follow-up question. I placed my phone face down on the kitchen table and left it there. In the days that followed, I did what I had always done best. I made lists. I separated the bank accounts. I closed the authorizations on the credit cards. I cancelled the automatic payments for Tyler's car insurance and Deborah's subscriptions. I did not rush it. I did not drag it out. I treated the end of my marriage the way I treated a complicated corporate audit, methodical, respectful, and brutally honest about what was no longer viable. When Deborah and I finally sat down to sign the divorce papers a month later, it was not dramatic. There was no shouting. There were no accusations. It was just two people realizing the same truth from different ends of a mahogany conference table. "I do not know who you are anymore," she said quietly, holding the pen over the signature line. I looked at her. I saw the woman I had tried to protect for 10 years, and I realized I had not been protecting her. I had been enabling her blindness. "I do," I said. That was the moment we both understood there was no fixing this. You can repair a door. You cannot repair a boundary once it has been crossed and denied. The divorce was clean. No court theatrics, no revenge spending, just signatures, dates, and a final transfer of assets that felt more like relief than loss. Tyler never spoke to me again. I did not reach out. The silence between us was the most honest conversation we had ever had. A few weeks later, I sat down with my retirement planner, a man named Jim Henderson. I had been seeing him for years. Same office, same framed photos of his grandchildren on the desk. Jim tapped his calculator, frowning at the new numbers I had provided. "You know, Arthur," he said, looking up with a surprised smile, "with these changes, with the removal of these monthly variable expenses, you have been carrying." "How much earlier?" I asked. I knew what was coming. Jim smiled. 4, maybe 5 years earlier than we planned." I sat back in the chair. I thought about that. 5 years. 5 years of mornings without tension. 5 years without waiting for the next crisis phone call. 5 years bought not with overtime or luck, but with the simple decision to stop paying for chaos. On a quiet Sunday morning in April, I sat in my living room with a cup of black coffee. It was the expensive dark roast I had bought at the grocery store that day I met Frank. It tasted rich, smooth, and entirely mine. The house was silent, except for the soft rhythmic tick of the wall clock. Outside, the neighborhood of Cleveland moved at its usual pace. I could hear a lawnmower starting up down the street. A dog barked 2 houses away. A delivery truck idled at the corner. I looked at my front door. It was solid oak, undamaged. The brass lock was engaged. It was exactly the way a door is supposed to be. For years, I had confused peace with endurance. I thought being a good man meant absorbing whatever came my way and smiling through the wreckage. I thought love meant paying the bill, no matter how high the cost. I was wrong. Peace has a cost. So does silence. The difference is who pays for it. For 10 years, I paid. Today, the account was finally balanced. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my little black notebook. The leather was worn soft from years of use. I clicked my silver Parker pen. I did not write a list of expenses. I did not write a timestamp of a disaster. I turned past all the pages of debts and incidents and arguments. I found a fresh, crisp, white page, I wrote one line. Day one. The greatest asset is yourself. I capped the pen and set it down on the table beside the coffee. I looked out the window at the grey Cleveland sky, which was breaking apart to let a shaft of sunlight touch the sidewalk. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool, clean air of a house that belonged only to me. I was alone, and I had never felt more complete.